Welcome to Season 2 of the Color Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. I'm here with Nathan Ramos Park. He's half Korean, half Filipino, and an award-winning writer, actor, and musician. He sold a feature and pilot to streamers and is working on a yet-to-be-announced streaming show. He's worked at or is working at these places: Disney, Netflix, Nickelodeon, Amazon, Google, Snap, Maker Studios, Cape, EWP, 2020 CBS Showcase. Basically an amazing all-around professional. He wrote an EP to Disney's Southeast Asia show. His video, Gay Asian Country Love Song, went viral. My mom loved it. Some characteristics he strives to embody are funny, serious, thoughtful, poignant, lighthearted, subversive, queer, and an Asian voice through the cultural din. I have Nathan Ramos Park.
Hi. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. I'm good.
I am so happy to be here. Our mutual friend, Peter, like we talked in the pre-intro, introduced us and connected and said, you have to interview Nathan. He is amazing and just will be so much fun. And that hyped me up completely.
Oh my gosh. Peter is a gem. He is just a soul sister to me.
He's gonna love that.
Yes. I mean, gosh. Oh my God. He's great. He's one of the most kind, thoughtful, talented people that I knew in New York. Yeah.
Absolutely. He's so pure-hearted and he's part of this team. And it's great because he made the logo and turned my really bad mock-up in my mind and turned it into Peter Stoltz in like less than 24 hours. I was like, how does this creative genius work, you know?
Truly. He's incredible. Yeah.
So I'm sitting here with another creative genius and I want to hop right in. And one of the questions that came up when I was doing some research and also talking to Peter is, if you could make any show, tell any story without funding being considered or metrics and outcomes, what would it be?
This question, when you sent me this, I was like, this is a list of questions. Like I was almost getting stressed about like, oh my God, what is that show? But I think talking about kind of what are my buckets that I really love, and so much of what I love is coming of age, a queer / comedic lens / being Asian, and then and then also I always love some kind of genre bend to something, whether it's sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and this show that I've always wanted, but I'm like, oh, it would be so expensive, is kind of somewhere between the tone of Grey's Anatomy and Scrubs, but like a medical show. But instead of just regular injuries, it would be kind of like, whether it's horror or superhero or sci-fi fantasy, like it's like, whether it's like, oh my gosh, like I've been turned to stone, and it's this, but it's like a medical staff that has to deal with their daily lives, and they all kind of have these special powers of like healing kind of thing. But like, it really, and because there's so many Asians in the medical field, that it would be kind of like an Asian forward / queer show, about these people that have to deal with mythic injuries. And so I think it kind of hit all of my things that I really love, and I was like, man, if someone wanted to greenlight something, like that would be something that, it's not really my genre that I'm in right now currently with work, but if I got the budget, like that's kind of where my storytelling started, was with like comic books. And my dad was a computer engineer for NASA. So I loved, sci-fi growing up. We watched Star Trek every week, and all along with like a lot of fighting movies. And so it kind of would hit a lot of my interests across the board, I think.
That's amazing. You have a psychologist here if you need that. I'm thinking, my mind is like erasing, like, if someone had anxiety, they could turn to stone or something, like really having those invisible disabilities as well as part of that. Of course, please don't do the stereotypical, like, no, which is like therapists having sex with their patients. They should not be doing that. So considering your dad was, working for NASA, and there's a lot of now talk about going to space. I mean, do you believe in aliens?
Absolutely. I mean, there is an infinite amount of space in the universe and a finite amount of matter. And, I think just the only sad thing is that the universe is expanding so much that there is a large swath of the universe that we'll never ever see, visibly or, as just like, universally, like there could be people on the other side of the universe, that we, will never meet, and I think that that's kind of sad that you can live these lives even in just a city like New York, where it's like you have your own small pathway and there's just millions of people that you'll never connect to and you'll never know their story, but they're living these vibrant lives, and so that's kind of what I love about space. You can kind of extrapolate out a lot of really fun ideas, in really big ways that we can't explore just with like shows that are just about a group of friends kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that's where people are starting to go. There's a lot of like, I watched the Song Joong Ki's space drama, and there's Daniel Day Kim just did space drama. I need to watch that because I love Anna Kendrick and Daniel Day Kim. But I think you're hitting the nail on the head is that there's so much to explore out there and not to have just a singular vision. And obviously we connected, even though we have our own separate mini universes. So there's possibility in it for sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of not having a linear, one-dimensional view, identity is multidimensional. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to that notion and also tell me what it was like to grow up in Strongville, Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my life feels multidimensional in a way that like there just isn't really anybody like me. And I think it felt so isolating for such a long time. And now I've been kind of, finding that community of people that also, are very multidimensional, I guess. And so my mom, she was, from Korea, and she grew up in Paju, which is near Seoul. And she grew up on a pig farm, with 6 sisters. And my dad, my dad was the first one born in America. His family is from the Philippines, and he went to West Point, graduated, was the first one to go to college in his family, was stationed in Korea. And I think, like my mom and him met. And I think that, they just kind of, it's that weird thing of like, I feel like our parents' generation was just like, oh, okay, let's get married, kind of thing. And, of course, the Korean side was not happy about my mom marrying a Filipino, like a brown Asian, man kind of thing. And so, they ended up, bouncing around because of the military, but then ended up in, near the cornfields of Ohio, because that's where NASA is. They need a lot of flat land for their aerospace program. And so, that's kind of where I grew up, in this pretty small white bread town, Strongsville. And it's one of those things where you don't realize how much growing up in a very homogenous place that you're not a part of, how much that impacts you mentally, emotionally, like I know that I'm very privileged, even like, like I'm putting quote marks, but it's just like I'm tall for being Asian, like I was athletic growing up because my dad forced us to be, because like my dad had like 3 rules: always wear shoes you can run in, always know where the exits are, and know how to fight, carry a weapon, because like that's the reality that we grew up in. But like you don't really think it's anything different until, you leave that place. So I think a lot of my reflection on growing up in Strongsville, a lot of that happened when I left. And so like, you don't really know that things are difficult when you're growing up, it's like everybody gets bullied, everybody feels bad, but it's kind of like when you realize so much of that comes from, being gay or Asian, that's kind of where you kind of had to start unpacking all that hurt and trauma.
Yeah, those life skills seem relevant even more today, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the reality that we live in. And unfortunately, we have to teach our kids, and they do drills and things like that. So when you started to unpack that, what did you realize later on that you didn't realize then?
It's really wild meeting West Coast Asians because they don't have the same baggage. They got to grow up in a community that looked like them. They got to, have parents that weren't so survival instinct. Like I didn't even realize like in the 90s, like we wouldn't really like go out to eat. And I didn't really realize it was because my parents didn't like that they got really bad service. Like we would get sat in the smoking section, like, and there was nobody there, like things that would happen where we just didn't realize it as young kids until we grew up. And my parents would be like, well, do you know why we did this? Do you know why we did that? And then it was on the other side, like I just talked to my parents, it was like a year ago, where they were like, wait a second, like you were bullied growing up? And it was like, yeah, are you kidding me? But like we would hide things from our parents too, because we didn't want them to know what it was like growing up. And so it was a big adjustment meeting a lot of Asian people that eat, like, I feel like a lot of this is very generalized and I don't know. I'm like, maybe I'll hit you up and be like, please cut this. But like,
yeah. Well, when you think about it and unpack that later, just let me know.
Yeah. But like, a lot of East Coast Asians, it's East, Midwest, South, like we're taught to just like snuggle ourselves to white adjacency, like just be second best and that's the best you can be, kind of thing. Or like if you are the best, it means that like you beat all the other Asians, kind of thing. And, like the West Coast doesn't really have that vibe, but they also at the same time, when I work in Hollywood, it's a white supremacist structure. And so a lot of, Asian people, they never had to assimilate on the West Coast. And so there's this kind of like, well, why don't you let us in? It's just like, oh, well, like, like the rules are already set up. And I think I was just fortunate enough to like grow up in those rules. All this hate, I'm like, it was really confusing to me to see a lot of Asian people realize this about America. And because, like I grew up my whole life like that. I grew up with my dad constantly getting pulled over because he looked Hispanic. So like, it was like, so like, he would get pulled over all the time. And like, I knew the fear, I would see people get hate crimes. Like there was a girl that got hate crimed in college and no one cared, she got run over by a car twice. Like we don't care. No one cares, and like, even me in that position, I was just like, well, she was stupid. It's like, it's very, and so like people that don't come from that place of how they were indoctrinated into the system, I think that this whole year was just very like, oh my gosh, like I was able to kind of, emotionally, mentally, at least be a little self-preserved this year because like it was such a whiplash for so many people this year. Whereas for me, I was just like, oh my God, I'm so glad people are waking up that a lot of people do want you dead. And it's taught from the moment people are born. And so that's the really tough thing, unfortunately. But I also don't operate from that place at all times because I think that it would kill us all, if we did, and so I think I always try and operate from a place of joy and understanding and like bridging the gap, but then also being prepared to fight at any time, kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I imagine storytelling is that, right? You're putting people's stories out there so more people are aware of what is going on. And I think particularly, I'm a West Coast Asian born and raised in San Francisco and then moved to the East Coast to get my PhD. So it was different worlds, I would say, because I went to a pretty much almost all Asian high school in San Francisco. And so, yeah, it wasn't a second thought. It was like, not that person's Asian. I think it was more apparent who the white people were and who the Hispanic people were or Black people because they were the minority there. And so as opposed to, oh, these Asians hang out in the courtyard and those on the steps, it wasn't like discriminating, which kind of Asian, I put in air quotes, are you? And I think that it was very different in the East Coast because while the school that I went to was very diverse, had a lot of international students, my department was not, right? And so I think when you don't see yourself reflected in those systems when you're so used to being in a system that you go to every store and there is an Asian person, the bank manager is Asian, those kinds of things. Now, I think the shock is that because there's so many Asians in the Bay Area that you're better at stats than me, but that means that if there are attacks, there's going to be a higher incidence just by the nature of the numbers of Asian Americans here. But I think that was shocking because people didn't really think about their Asianness, and we see people working at these high level positions at these large tech companies saying, oh, they've made it, they make six figures, they run their own businesses. And so I think that is shocking. And then for me, having children, trying to help them understand that is really challenging. So
Absolutely.
I'm
Absolutely.
gonna enroll them in jujitsu when it's safe with Corona time. And
Yeah.
they're girls, but
Yeah.
they can get down with lightsabers. So
Yeah.
um so speaking of which, though, you did break into Hollywood. You do and are fighting for a seat at the table in multiple regards. So thinking about your experience, what challenges have you faced as a gay Asian American male trying to, again, tell your story, tell our stories?
Yeah. I mean, I think, gosh, the difficulty is when you're a young kid and you watch TV, all you see are the actors. And so many kids, like, they're just like, I guess I want to be an actor. I would love to do that. Yeah, I would love to tell stories, kind of thing. The difficulty is, like, there's so much inherent privilege in the success of Hollywood. You see the nepotism of, like, just even in Falcon and Winter Soldier, like Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell's kid is like the second, the lead of the show. Like, it's like you see all the nepotism, and then you see, every agency or every director's kid, like, that is the system. Like, the system is set up so that it raises up certain people with money and privilege, kind of thing. And so what's difficult is you continually hit a big break, because you do one job and you realize you sell a feature, and like, or you get this big job, and like, it's so feast or famine. You have to live off that money for a really long time, kind of thing. And so I think so much of it is, it's cultural, but it's also capital. You need so much money to start and stay in this industry. And so people that have parents that can just support them, like, that's huge. It's like, it's really difficult. Like, when I was trying to start out, I was working as a bartender, and I was working 40, 50 hours a week, and then forcing myself to put 20 hours a week on top of that into writing. And like, that's the difficulty that we don't realize. It's like, some people that have privilege, they already have the connection. So it's like, you also then, on top of the 20 hours of writing, you have to put in 20 hours a week of networking, of meeting people. That also costs money, and so I think that there's just such a huge barrier. And anyone who makes it in this industry, like, that doesn't have connections, like, it's really wild, the things that they have to do. I have friends that, like, have had to do sex work, and like, that's great. Or like, they have to be bottle service girls, or you're working as a server and you're sitting on the patio and it rains and you make $13 from an 8-hour shift. You're eating ramen and eggs for every meal, like, I think that's the road is really difficult. And then putting on top of that, there's so much unconscious communication that happens in the industry. And if you are not fitting into the, like, when you look at execs, I think the numbers, it's 85% of execs are all straight white men. If you don't understand the body language that you need to prostrate yourself, if you don't understand how they're consuming you, then it doesn't matter if you have the best script, you're not going to push through. You have to get people, like, and it's so much about institutional success. The way some of us were trying to kind of emulate the Black experience in Hollywood, like, they've created their own studios, their own production companies, their own means of production, their own systems of casting, because they've had to, because they were like, oh, like, if we let white people only cast, like, they're only going to cast a certain idea of what they think is acceptable on screen from this race, and we're seeing that right now. Like, how many full Asian men are love interests on TV right now? It's truly not a Hapa man's, like, fault that they get cast, but like, it's the prism as to which whiteness, which is in power, sees us in their industry, in their machinery. Oh, well, we don't want to have a full Asian because of X, Y, and Z. Oh, we want and then on the other tone, it's like, oh, we want a light-skinned full Asian girl because her whiteness might give her power in this scene. It's like, it's the more that we understand how Hollywood works, then it's easier to, once you understand how the sausage is made, then you understand which ingredients you need to put in to, sell your wares, kind of thing. And I think that's the main thing that I both had privilege of coming to LA and working in New York. And but also, like, it's something that I do feel guilty about, because it's like, I know the things, the easy tricks. Like West Coast Asians do not use their eyebrows when they talk. And if you do not use your eyebrows, white people will not hire you and will not be friends with you. Like that's what it is. Like it's like if you don't use your hands and you don't move your eyes, then like you must be disinterested. It's like, because there are so many other ways that Asians communicate. We don't say I love you to our parents. Like our parents will bring us food, or they will do things. We are a more active service kind of person. Or like Hollywood, it's about asking for what you need. And Asians were like, no, our work should stand on its own. But like that's just not how this industry is structured. And so much I think of my success comes from understanding the game of it, which people might think I'm a psycho for, but I think it's an important thing that like, I try and always tell people. It's like, I have a pitch coming up next week. I'm pitching to all the streamers, and it's with someone who's an Asian person that grew up on the West Coast, and I've had to kind of coach them like, this is how your voice needs to end this sentence for them to not disregard you. For me, it comes down to that. Like, of course, we could pitch to someone that's really kind and empathetic, but like, I've been in so many racist meetings, like horribly racist meetings, that it's just like, if you want to work here, you have to know how to overcome those moments.
Well, I mean, you're speaking to the psychology of the whole process, and I think that's what people aren't aware of, that they're just like, cast this Asian person or Asian American person, and it sounds like there's so much that's involved with it. And you have to be pretty mentally tough as well as have coping skills in order to work your way through that psychology, because you're talking about being aware of what we call your stimulus value, right? And when I, for instance, say something as a small Asian American female, even though I'm a manager at work, it will be perceived as very different. It might be funny if I cuss or say the F-bomb, but everyone interprets that in very different ways, as well as when I'm in therapy with people, right? It's like, how are they perceiving me? How am I perceiving them? What are you bringing to the table? And I think that's a really advanced skill for someone who isn't clinically trained. So I would say that it's not psycho. It's something that we're taught to really think about. But it's not something that like your parents say, oh, think about, how you're going to come across to someone in a room. And I think you're talking about more implicit messages that we just don't really talk about that. Just do your work, put your head down. My mom is a firecracker, basically. And so, I've said in other interviews that I've been on other people's shows, like we cuss at each other all the time for fun. And everything I say on camera is everything I say to her face, and she loves it. So like when I showed, I'm like best friends with her. So I was able to say, hey, I'm interviewing Nathan, like check out his gay Asian cowboy, video. And she was like, yeah, I'm so excited about this. I can't wait. But I think there's a lot of variation in that. And as you're speaking to, it also depends on what intergenerational trauma people are bringing, where they are in the country or in the world. And so people are bringing in all these different experiences.
You are just the one of the first people that have like put into like the actual clinical terminology that I've never heard, like the stimulus, like that word, and it's blowing my mind right now, because it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't something that I've just made up. Like, no, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Like that's, I'm going to read all about that, after this. I'm going to look up everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad I was able to validate you today. And, I only get paid for this kind of stuff. So no, I'm kidding. But I think, part of it is really, how do you cope with all of that? Because one, starting from when you're bartending and you're exhausted, and bartending is one of the toughest jobs because you're pretty much a therapist with alcohol. So people's inhibitions are down. And I won't even ask you any stories Peter told you. I've heard a lot of them, but that, and then having the time, like you said, to motivate yourself to operate on little sleep, and already exhausting all of your energy talking to people in your day job.
I mean, I think, gosh, that's a lot to unpack, and that's a great question. Gosh, at the beginning of my career, I think I was carrying a lot of baggage. I think when I was like in my early 20s, I was like, I feel like I'm getting gaslit. I was living in Cleveland, and I was like, am I crazy, or like, am I just felt undesirable, untalented, not seen. And it was like, is it me, or is it the world? And I realized, like, I would do all these like scientific experiments. I would set up different dating profiles and be like, how many,
You are a psychologist
yes,
without
yeah.
the PhD.
And so, like, and I would get these results and be like, oh no, empirically, people don't want me and people are treating me badly, and this isn't in my head, and I think I kind of was pushing against that for so long. I mean, like when I was 19, my parents basically like emotionally, mentally disowned me for coming out, like all that kind of thing. Because I mean, they were indoctrinated by a white system, it's like colonization, like my dad's from the Philippines. But I think what broke my brain, I did get a tattoo when I was like 26 that says like choose joy, because it's like I just realized like it's like I can spend all this energy being upset about what the world is, or I can take all this energy and put it towards what I want the world to be. And
that's great.
Yeah, and I did this show for Disney Southeast Asia, and I was in Singapore, and I had heard, oh my God, you can't chew gum, you can't spit, you can't do anything, and it's fascist, like everybody was like, there were all these like ideas that were planted in my brain about Asia, about all these places. And I went there, and it was like the future. It was beautiful. It was incredibly clean. And I never felt more validated as a queer Asian person than going to an Asian country. And I've never gotten a message on an app. I've always had to message someone first. I feel like I'm a hot bitch,
Yeah.
I am hot. I have a job.
Yeah.
Like, I will care for you. I am like submissive. I want to massage you and cook for you and take my credit card and go, spend it on whatever you want. Like, please, like,
oh my gosh. I've been married now tomorrow I've been married obviously less time than I've been with my husband overall, but it'll be 21 years tomorrow. And you sound amazing. And I'm sure that he will laugh because he listens and edits these, the interviews itself. He'll love that.
Yeah.
He will love, I'll be like, you are amazing. And guess what Nathan is willing to do?
I'm like, literally like, tell me whatever you want me to do. But it's like, and like, now that I finally like love myself, I do feel like dating sure is like a little better, but like going to another country where everyone looks like me, and it was like my phone would not stop buzzing, with like people wanting to, date or hook up or whatever in Singapore, like which supposedly is strict, like country. It was like, I never felt more desired than when I was in this like homogenous place that was homogenous to me. And it completely broke my brain. I was there for four weeks, and then I came back to America, and that was like almost 4 years ago. And since then I've just been so completely free and unbothered by, trying to placate people that are indoctrinated into an unconsciously biased system, and it really like has set me completely free to be like, if I want something, I know that I have to go get it. And that's just what the parameters are of this system. And it is what it is. And I need to not be sad that people are not trying to come get this, in a way. Like,
because you're a hot bitch.
Exactly. It's like they're gonna find a gold mine, It's just like, but they're not digging over here, but that's fine because I'm gonna go, do my own digging, and I think that just giving myself permission to, live joyfully really kind of confuses a lot of people too. I think that like people might think it's fake, or they might think like, oh, well, you have these other privileges. It's like, yeah, I do have these other privileges as well, and like, I acknowledge those and I am grateful for those. But I don't also have to apologize for in the way that you want me to apologize for them, kind of thing.
Yeah. And the question of, is there an apology even needed? I think that's the other part is many Asian Americans are taught to apologize for things that really like are you really sorry? And do you need to be sorry about them? And I think that's a really good framework to kind of also ask yourself when you are feeling the need to apologize for everything. And so now I'm really conscious when I write emails, because I used to be like, my apologies, da 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 da. And I was like, I'm not sorry about that. I just asked for what needs to be done. So I think just being conscious of those things are important. Now you mentioned that you came out to your parents at 19. What was that like, and how is your relationship with them now?
I think what happened was, like I grew up in the 90s, and it was this kind of feeling of, because I only was around white people, I never saw the queer Asian experience, like, and so much of this idea of like, I'm coming out and you're going to have to accept me. Like, it is such a white idea. It is such like an American idea. And when I came to the West Coast, like I see like, there's so many people that like, they never came out to their parents, but like their parents are fine with them bringing their, their significant other around kind of thing, but they just don't talk about it. And I had to really kind of do my own decolonization, especially, because the Philippines is the most queer culture. They didn't have, like gender, they don't have gender identities, they didn't have like half their gods, their mythology are queer, like the god of death is, in love with the moon, and they're both, personified by men, and it's just like, when I started learning my history, I was like, oh man, like I tried to shoehorn, my parents' existence into what I thought I was supposed to do, and so like I came out to them knowing it was a time bomb, I knew that they were gonna basically do this. And so I it's hard to use the word disown, because it's like a lot of Asian parents are just like, well, you can either follow this or you don't have to be a part of it. And so it's like, is that disowning, or is that just kind of their unreasonable parameters, in a way? And so much of Asian parents' actions, whether it's fair or not, is from the fear that we will not be accepted, and that like we have to follow the norms, or else like, our life is going to be harder. And they left their home countries to make our lives easier. And so I think so much of that, their feelings, comes from their fears. And I think, like at 25, I kind of had that realization. And, I'm turning 35 this year now, and it's been 10 years, but, and I think like, I think it's sad that I don't know if we'll ever like see eye to eye, in a way, but my door is always completely open, and like, I'm always here to kind of help them in whatever they need. But at the same time, it's just like, it is difficult, because every time I do see my parents, they're always just like, well, you are going to hell, and it's just like, even if
Thank you.
yeah. And even if it's casual, it's just like, it's like that ruins like my entire day or my week, thinking about like how much they don't approve of me. And so I think it is healthier for me just to not put myself in those situations, but at the same time, it's a bummer that like white supremacy won and like you want me dead, like, I don't know, like it's like that's a bummer, but at the same time, I understand it. And I even, like they were avid Trump supporters and, anti-vaxxers for a while, and like, it's just kind of like, okay, like, how do we navigate this? Because I know that you're not navigating from your own place, you're navigating by Fox News, so it's like, okay, it's difficult, but at the same time, I wouldn't say it's perfect by any means, but I would say that like, I don't have to spend emotional capital on kind of like the healing of myself in that anymore, which is nice.
Well, I mean, that takes so much strength. And I think 2 episodes ago, I released an episode. We had Jackie Faye on, and she is a Asian female rapper who's also a data engineer.
Cool.
That's a mouthful. But basically, she came out to her mom and she was like, I was petty as F because I recorded that. And if she said anything wrong, I was going to replay it for her, and in case like she twisted my words. And I mean, for her, it was a positive experience, but that preparatory anxiety it's so difficult, even though for many of her family members, they, like you said, they pretty much accepted her, even though she didn't talk about it. But I think for whatever reason, as well as the white supremacy, the white privilege, the model of it, it makes it just so challenging to not be in that box in that group. And so some people do go, I've been watching a lot of Star Wars. Some people go to the dark side and, embrace kind of the negativity and the non-acceptance or discrimination and violence because, people don't fit in neatly into those boxes. So now, what inspired you to then say, okay, I dropped this bombshell. Now, was it always your dream to go into the entertainment industry? And how did you make your way to New York, to Hollywood, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I was like a competition pianist growing up. I was a singer. I won like Ohio Idol, like
So
when
awesome.
I was like 18, and I I became a teacher, a teaching artist for 2 years in Cleveland, and I was working at the richest school, which is Hawken, and the poorest school the next week after that, which would be like East Tech in Cleveland. And it was just so jarring to see that how disparate the privilege was. And it really just like messed my brain up. Like I was like, I can't do this anymore. And there was a part of me that wanted to be an actor. It was that weird thing of like, I remember like the week before I was going to move to New York, this person was like, like you're going to come groveling back to Ohio but I never felt like Ohio was my home. People that feel like the places like Ohio is home will go somewhere to like New York or LA, and then they'll be like, if it doesn't work out for them, then they'll come back to Ohio. But like, I've never felt the compulsion to be like, I feel like I don't want to ever paint Ohio in a negative way. Like my closest friends in Ohio, like they're the most wonderful people. And when I was disowned by my parents, like I was living with like, two white women, like that, like saved my life. But when it came to like, moving to New York, I was like, great, I'm going to move to New York and be an actor kind of thing. And so I moved, and I was just very fortunate, like whether it is, and like, to this day, it's like, is it my white adjacency? Is it because I'm tall? Is it because like, X, Y, and Z, I know how to talk and I know my social EQ, I booked my first off-Broadway show, I think 6 days into New York. Wow. And then, it was like longest running off-Broadway show, but I was playing Long Duck Dong, for Awesome 80s Prom. And then a month or 2 months later, I then booked Prison Dancer, which was like the first like off-Broadway all Asian cast, Asian writing team. We won Best Ensemble for the New York Musical Theater Festival. And I was understudying like my idol, like Jose Lana, at the time. It was just kind of like, I was like naively like, wait, so this is supposed to be hard, and like
things are moving.
I was like working in an Iron Chef restaurant, making good money as a bartender server at the time, and then like was working for Be Our Guest, so I could bartend anywhere in the city. It was like this hip place. But then I did a couple other things, and I was just like, to what end are we doing any of this for? Like, I don't want to do Miss Saigon. I don't want to do King and I. Like, there's all these like Asian shows. They're still very white savior narrative kind of thing. Or like Miss Saigon it's brutal, And so I wanted to write a comedy about, just like Asian millennials in New York City and whether like socioeconomic status affects, success kind of thing. And so I didn't know how to write. I wrote it on an iPad mini because I was so poor I didn't even have a computer. And it ended up winning this national writing competition. So that's kind of, the start of my career. And then I was like, okay, writing is kind of taking off. And so I moved to LA, and thankfully a friend from college submitted me for this sketch comedy show, and I got staffed on that, and I ended up writing like music that was nominated for a Queerty, and a Webby, which was a couple other music videos, and then did the CAPE program, which is like about uplifting Asian voices, and so through that I got to meet Adele Lim, and she just was such like an incredible mentor and friend, and and then she did Crazy Rich Asians, and through kind of just networking and then just like kind of continuing to work, I did the reboot for the Mickey Mouse Club. I did episode of Transformers for Nickelodeon. I sold a feature and I sold a show, and I'm currently working on a streaming show right now. That's so I mean, gosh, I mean, like, I don't know. It's this weird, like every time you try and grab on to like, how did you do it? It's really hard to kind of, nail it down. Yeah. But.
I mean, I'm a firm believer that it's pure talent and a bit of luck, right? Okay. You're really connecting with some wonderful people. And again, it's like who would have thought that like being close friends with Peter in college and beyond would like lead me to you, we're just like really great friends. And we worked together as well as him and my husband worked together in college. So it's just really interesting how things, pan out. So, I mean, you've had so many great projects, right? And, we have the comic, The Good Asian, that Peter's like obsessed about, the Gay Asian Cowboy viral video that just, I mean, there's so much diversity in your work as well. So what project or projects are you most proud of, if you could pick one or two?
Yeah. Well, so The Good Asian, actually, so that's like, I know actually Pornzak, the writer of that, like, it's just like, but I mean, like, yeah, we're all just kind of, writing things that we love. Gosh, but my favorite, when you said that question, I was just like, oh God, what is that? And honestly, I feel like, probably like the reboot of Mickey Mouse Club was called Club Mickey Mouse. It was this like all digital kind of thing. And it was the first time where I kind of feel like I put not myself in any danger of losing a job, but like I took risks with that job. And, like there ended up being, out of 8 kids, like, 4 of them ended up being Asian on the show, and so like it was this kind of thing where it was just like, hey, like, it would be really great if this show wasn't just 4 white kids and then 4 POC. It would be really great if it was like 2, 2, 2, 2. And, like gratefully, like I already had an EP that was like, already really kind of, like thoughtful in that way. And so she already was pushing for that. But it was the first time where I got to work with like the next generation of talent. And at first it was this kind of like, oh, they don't have baggage. Like it was really difficult to not be kind of frustrated with them, because it was just like, oh, you don't know how hard it is. But then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm already becoming like this old crotchety,
grumpy.
Man. Yeah. And it was just, and then so it like had to change that kind of thought process of just like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that they get to be so happy every moment, kind of thing. And of course dealing with their own baggage,
Sure.
but like so much of their baggage, what isn't, like about race. And that was something that like I realized it was such a step forward, and I think that project is, I still look back, and that was like 4 years ago. I still look back and I'm just like, man, like watching their videos, like I'm seeing my young self in these kids. And it's just like, there's nothing better than feeling that torch pass, because I think that I've done a lot of things that I'm proud of personally, but that they're just like my accolades in a vacuum, whereas like, I feel like the things that I'm most excited that I've done are things that like really I feel like help build community and, push ourselves kind of forward and light kind of thing.
Yeah, I had my proud moment, and a lot of people may be surprised, but I was invited to my daughter's class for APAM and Mental Health Awareness Month, and we surprised her with her teacher. So my husband was recording it on when they were together and she's on Zoom, and she was like screaming, and I'm like, I'm keeping this video when you're a teenager and you hopefully still want to hang out with me, but still, like it's that piece of like, you get to speak to a group of children that have no idea, or at least most of them didn't know what a psychologist did, that was a job, and that what a podcast was, and why, why we do what we do. And, my daughter is a part of it. We have her tagged on things as the assistant, and she's just so proud of it. Right. And at 9 years old, she can see all these stories and all these voices. And that's something that I didn't have growing up. We had like the yellow Power Ranger, which I was so glad, because I'm like, my best friend was half white, half Latina. And so she was Kimberly and I was Trini. And so it worked out right in terms of representation, but it wasn't like we were seeing a whole bunch of Asian Americans on TV. I mean, my dad and I watched Margaret Cho's show, and it was surreal to talk to her. But I think those things are just so important when it goes beyond us, and we're able to pass on these messages to the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on a fun topic that I love, you're a K-pop connoisseur, I've heard, and I'm a huge ARMY, as everyone knows. And so why do you think K-pop has resonated so much with people, especially with BTS being a global top artist?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, I've been trying to think of, like 'cause I've written a couple of K-pop things, and I think it comes with a lot of Korean their kind of pursuit of excellence in a way. Like it's like the pursuit of like the dancing is going to be right, the fashion has to be on, kind of thing. It's like they took an American idea, which is pop music, and they really kind of put it through this like Korean discipline and rigor of, like great, let's,
Training.
yeah, and training. And like they also, like the people that create the music, they have all these kind of classical music backgrounds, and so you'll hear a lot of kind of earwormy things that they do that, like so I think on the technical side it's that, but then also on a thematic side, I think pop music in America it kind of became escapism at some point, where it's just like, oh my god, let's drink, let's have fun, and it's just about like drinking and love, kind of thing. And that's kind of like what American pop music is, whereas BTS's music, like it's so much about deconstructing social barriers, LGBTQ rights, social rights, classism, government oversight. Like that's what BTS's music is,
Mental
like
health, love
mental
yourself.
health. Exactly. And because even like my favorite BTS song is Paradise. And they have this lyric that's like "kum이 없어도 괜찮아," and it's like it's okay to not have a dream. Like you don't need to be keeping running in this.
I wrote that down. I collect quotes. I
Yeah.
have that same quote.
What?
No, I am not kidding. And Suga
Yeah.
says that all the time.
Yeah. It's like it's okay to not be forced in a societal pressure to chase something just for the sake of chasing something, and that like we don't have that in American pop music. And I think K-pop's escapism is kind of, what if we were better versions of ourselves, or what if we were the coolest version, the sexiest version, the most mysterious version, the most horrific version of ourselves, like that's what K-pop does. And so it's like I feel like K-pop escapism is actually elevation versus American pop music, which is like get drunk, like hook up, and it doesn't ask us to look inside in a way. And so that to me is, I love K-pop so much.
Me too. I mean, what other bands or artists do you stand like in that industry?
I mean, like I treat K-pop like sports. So like I stand everyone, like every single group that is out, I know everything about them, because it's like, to me it's, when you see all these produced shows, and they take different people from different groups and different labels and mix them together, like, and you get these iconic collabs,
I love
mean,
Kingdom. Have you seen Kingdom?
oh my gosh, yes.
I love Stray Kids, and then when I saw all of them doing, and they did the do 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 the
Yeah.
do 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 do, and I was just like, because that was the last concert that my husband and I went to before the pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
And it was so surreal because we were super close. It was in San Jose, like the San Jose University concert hall. And it was still a very intimate show, because I've fortunately been able to see BTS in 2018. And so it's just a very, like a smaller venue. And it was right when the pandemic hit. So it was a high touch. And, but we had to wear masks, sanitize and all that. But it was like, you can't take any pictures when you're doing it. But it's like, what? I get to high five them? It's so cool.
It's so wild, like the personal connection that these groups make. Even like AB6, like I'm just like, I love AB6, I love CIX, I love all these like kind of up and coming groups. And then, you have the big three, of course, like NCT, SHINee is my all-time favorite. You have these like groups up and comers, and you have just like, these like institutions, Twice, and like it's just, I feel like K-pop is just doing the lore and the breadth of material, and like allowing people to take risks in a way that like just excites me as a musician and like a storyteller too, and so
there's so much inspiration from them. And Hwasa는 Achoayo, Hwasa's just like a queen, like she's amazing. And so, well, I'm glad, that it's bringing so much joy to people, and it's really bringing diverse people together. Like I'm on Clubhouse groups with, the army rooms, and, it's just the diversity around the world. It's just amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, like On Kingdom, ATs and the Boys. I mean, like
Yes.
all the groups are amazing, but
Mhm.
like I loved the Boys during Road to Kingdom. Then and then like like now that BGS is like, the biggest, now that Hive is the biggest company, like
Yeah.
and Hypen and TXT, like
And hype and
amazing.
we watched the whole show. I don't know if you watched Island. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
We love it. So it's like my daughter's like generation. And I was so heartbroken when Kay didn't make it. Like
Mm,
I was so heartbroken. But
yeah.
he's supposed to debut with a on the Japan side of the label. So
Yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah.
I hope for that with Taki. So I guess moving forward, like if you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I legitimately like I've been thinking about this question, I because it's I feel like I put so much pressure on myself for these
It's a
questions,
very
but
random question, but
yeah,
I like clearly you know who I would have dinner with, but
yeah.
you know,
I mean, like I was thinking of, someone Korean, and then I was thinking of someone Filipino, and then, but I was thinking of like, who like changed my life, in a lot of ways. I mean, like I think it is Beyonce, like and I think like that's
Queen
like,
Bee.
yeah, I mean, like I know it's such like a basic answer, but I think like she to me is like her and Michael Jackson, like they were the prototype for K-pop, you know, like work yourself to the bone and treat yourself like an athlete. And I think that it's like I feel like K-pop gets such a bad rap of like we have Olympic trainings centers all over America that are way more abusive than anything that like it's like yeah K-pop yeah they're dancing 8 hours a day. We have literally people playing sports for that long when they're training for the Olympics where they're doing that. It's like this is just another sport kind of thing. And I think Beyonce, it's just kind of like hearing, I would just love an empowering, like it's like I think that some people like you would go in as a fan in a way, and it's like I kind of want to like start going into these places is not necessarily a fan, but like I respect you so much and I want to continue your legacy in a way that, how do we continue the legacy of performers and creators that put in like lasting cultural touchstones that move our, move humanity forward. And I think Beyonce is that person in our generation. And it's kind of like, how do we not replicate that, but how do we continue to keep that bar that high is something that I would just love to kind of, see. And I think that just like she is that person. Because I did meet Kelly Clarkson already, and that was my other like Kelly
Oh
Clarkson
my
changed my
gosh, how
life.
was that?
Changed my life. I was on her unaired pilot as one of her guests, because I was like a super fan,
She's
and
just
so
so real.
yeah, she's amazing. And like, because I had made like a Kelly Clarkson super fan like sketch and on YouTube, and they found it and they were like, "Great, do you want to be on the pilot?" And it was like, I just regret that I almost passed out, and then I was like too, I was too nervous to say anything, and so my friend just like spoke for us, and it was like, oh man, I want to go back in time and just like not be completely stunned, in that moment. But yeah, I would say like, powerful women.
Well, I mean, and that's an amazing answer, and I think it the question is just so interesting because people have a diversity of answers, right? And the reasons why, you know. And similarly, like while I am a huge BTS army, I would like to talk with them more. Like I would really like to take a walk with RM and just
Hmm.
ask him these very deep questions that he clearly ponders and just how they stay so down to earth when the whole world is watching and even when they make mistakes and things like that, how they cope with that, right? And
Hmm.
how they support each other. Because on Island, it was their clip was great because they were just like,
Yeah.
oh, that guy's embarrassed, you're gonna have to get over that because it's gonna be out there and you're just gonna have to accept that you're gonna embarrass yourself. And I think they just seem so much more free now playing around, being playful on camera because they're just like,
Yeah.
we're doing good things and we're just going to be ourselves, and that's what they're trying to teach us. So um so thinking about people wanting to flock into the industry, and aside from what maybe some people wanting fame, the other part is continuing these legacies and creating new ones. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to get into the industry and pursue their dreams?
Mm, yeah. I I think my answer to this question is that knowledge is power. It sounds so basic, but if you don't understand how a movie is made or how a TV show is made or how an actor becomes an actor, how a writer becomes a writer, if you don't understand those things, then like it's going to be very difficult for you to try and engage with the machine. It's like if you read a Deadline article and it says executive producer and you don't know what that means, or if you say they're a manager or they're a director and you're just like, I don't know what any of this means. If it's uncovering what those things are. I have so many friends that are in industry. They're like, how does that writing side work? And you're just kind of like, well, like this is how it works. This is the process of what's called development. This is the process of what's called current. This is the process of production. And I think like so often we get wrapped up in the creative side of like, oh my God, I have an idea, or oh my gosh, I wrote a script. And like the writing portion of the writing and the acting is only 10% of what this industry is. Like the other 90% is understanding the industry as a business and understanding the industry as a system. So I think it's like, to me, 45% business, 45% system, and then just 10% talent,
Yeah. I think the creative side, like even with podcasts, right? I mean, it's on a very small scale comparatively, but the interview is like the easiest part, like editing, having the images, like building the brand. Building, brand recognition and building your audience. Those are all things. And even building a private practice all these years, it's like, as a psychologist, I wasn't trained to run a business. I've always been entrepreneurial, but when you have to create your own website and put listings and all these kinds of things and put your specialties down and market yourself, that's not what psychologists are taught to do. You're taught to like be containers for people and help them process their stuff and not promote yourself. But I think times have changed where things are very different than it was decades ago or a long time ago when Freud was a therapist. Like he wasn't faced with Instagram and all these kinds of things. But that's really important for people to know. Like, mostly everything is a business, whether or not we want to acknowledge that or not. I mean, the unfortunate or fortunate part is we live in a capitalistic society. So I think those are really important points. So what can we expect? I know that you're probably under NDA for a lot of things, but what projects can we expect or things to look forward to? And how can we stay, on the pulse of what you're doing? How can we connect with you?
Oh, that's so nice. I just feel like my handle's at Nathan Ramos Park. Gosh, I mean, what am I working on? It's that weird thing of like, I don't know what right now, like we're developing the show at this streamer. Hopefully when it gets greenlit, it will, the Deadline article will drop, that kind of thing. So I'm working on a show. I sold a show and I sold a movie and I have been developing a couple other things. And so hopefully when those things come out, it's always that thing as a writer where you have to just kind of be deadened emotionally because like something that I worked on, will come out and it's like, oh, it's been a year and a half or 2 years. It's like I wrote on a show last year and it's like, oh, hopefully that show comes out like by November, like that kind of thing where it's like, it's been 18 months. And so it's like, I don't even remember really like what I even wrote kind of thing. And I'm a different writer a year later, 2 years later. And so you're constantly seeing things that happened from a different part of your past, but it's showing up in your present. And so it's always really interesting seeing that. And then you're always kind of trying to forecast, for me, 3 to 5 years in advance, because, once you start on the train, like everything is asking longer and longer amounts of time for you. So it's like, okay, wow, oh my gosh, for the first time, I think I have the next like 3 years of my life on a track, kind of thing. And so I think the biggest piece of advice is like, it's such a journey, just enjoying the ride of it, because like the destination is so fleeting and and anticlimactic all the time. Yeah, if your episode airs, or yeah, if you get this job, the next day you still have to like shower and put your pants on and like go back to existence.
We hope. I mean, in Zoom days, who knows?
Exactly. So if you're not happy with yourself, and if you're not happy when you wake up in the morning, that means like you're probably not going to be happy when you have your dream job, because your job and your work is not going to bring joy. It's like you have to already have that fuel for you to get through other things. I have very successful friends that are very unhappy, and then, you know, friends that haven't broken through, but they're you can feel their joy radiating from them. And so yeah, I think that that's like a big thing that I learned, and that I look forward to every day. Kind of.
I couldn't have said it any better. And, you know, like I said, I'm stating it on this interview, and I put it on the email, like, this is an alert. This is my new bestie. And, you know, we're taking this show on the road. So,
Yes.
no, I thank you so much for coming on the show. It truly has been a joy, as Peter promised, and he is a man of his word. So thank you so much for doing this.
Anytime. You are wonderful. And the way that you kind of look at all these things through your psychology lens is really, really cool. And I had a joy as well. I had a blast. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to the Color Success Podcast. Listen, like, subscribe on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, IG, and if you want exclusive content, you can join our Patreon. All links can be found at colorofsuccesspodcast.com.